Hey guys, hope you're doing well. In the wake of Operation Spiderweb, really demonstrating that Ukraine is not prepared to lay down here in the Ukraine Russia conflict, and with the kind of increasingly surprisingly good news coming out of the Ukrainian central bank, indicating that the actual macroeconomy there is doing surprisingly well despite the war. I think our attention and our concern needs to shift somewhat towards how is the Russian economy doing and what is the overall goal for Putin's regime in reconfiguring that economy. It's obvious they want to focus more on becoming a sort of a war economy, helping to augment the relatively volatile, extractive oil and gas economy that just goes up and down depending on a lot of external factors that they can't control. They'd like to continue to make sales internationally from their weapon systems. Unfortunately, this is getting more and more difficult, I think, for a couple of interesting reasons. One is I do think the U.S. sanctions are working in the sense that any arms acquisitions that would have taken place from Vietnam or India or Algeria or whoever in the past, obviously that has to go through a bank. And those banks tend to be in, the usual suspect places, New York and London and places like that. So that's damaged their ability to make those sales. Additionally, I think because of sanctions, there's questions about how can Russia update its weapons systems. They're having harder and harder time accessing the input material to do that. Obviously, it's not impossible, but it's harder and harder and more expensive. The war in Ukraine, frankly, the rate at which Russian weapon systems are being blown up on the ground, behind the lines, even at this point, also indicates the increased need for the Russians to use those weapon systems to replenish their supplies, and really, there's also just the reality that the war in Ukraine is not a great advertisement for Russian weapon systems, full stop. And places like Vietnam, in particular, might be more apt to buy very similar weapon systems from other cheaper providers like China, whereas countries like India might be more likely to shift towards buying systems from the Americans, from the United States. So I'm really curious for your thoughts. Like, do you see this? Which side of this do you see winning out? Obviously, Russia has a lot of contacts in around the world to sell these weapons, and they have a lot of push to do this from Putin top down. But there's also, I think, increasing headwinds that are going to make this really difficult for them to kind of make these sales going forward. So really curious for your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks as always for watching.